By the way, he has also a Fuller experience. Fuller, I mean institutionally Fuller.
Yeah.
Not only institutional.
Oh, okay.
So let me welcome you in Armenia. It's on the premises of the Armenian Evangelical Church. Though this part does not belong to the church, this is academic. So we try to keep our ecumenical belonging outside and bring here students who will be able to learn, then decide for themselves what they want to do for the Lord. Paul knows well, and I do as well, that when you enter the seminary you have too many thoughts, and at the end, when you try to look back, you realize that many of your thoughts have changed. You have completely new ideas, you have completely new vision, and the goal or the destiny that you were seeing at the beginning of your studies are gone. So that's why we're saying this is a place when you come with full head and full heart, and you live with a different head and different heart. Hopefully today I will be able to present to you something about the Evangelical Church, Armenian Evangelical Church, that might change your vision as well. I don't want to talk about facts and statistics and data. You have been given some sheets, I believe, yesterday, and you can look for yourself. And frankly saying, because of my first education in engineering, I got sick and tired of figures, formulas, and that's it. I mean, you name it. So I prefer to talk about lively subjects. You probably know that the Armenian Evangelical Church started in 1846, mid-19th century. Not here, in Western Armenia, or what is now called Turkey, in Istanbul, at that time Constantinople. It started as an inside Reformation movement. There was a group of Armenian apostolic believers who believed that the church needs some reformation. There is a need for new spiritual revival in the church. However, I mean, the church leadership, as usual, was unable to understand what the lay people are demanding, though there was also a priest with them, and it ended up with anathema. They were just kicked out of the church. And that's how the Armenian Evangelical movement started. Without going into the details, with some missionary support that they have received later on, without going into other details, on July 1st, 1846, the Armenian Evangelical Church was established, and we praise the Lord for more than 160 years of our worship and our service to this country and to this people. You know, the Armenian Evangelicals have shared unfortunate destiny of Armenian nation in 1915, after the genocide that happened in Western Armenia. We lost many Armenian evangelicals, and not only people, but also institutions, establishments, infrastructure, because at that time the Armenian Evangelical Church in Western Armenia was a well-recognized entity. However, we always tend to forget that in the Eastern Armenia, in this part, we also had some evangelical presence. And recently I was working in the archive, our state archive, and I found some very interesting documents verifying my idea that the evangelical church in Eastern Armenia started actually earlier than in the Western Armenia. However, it was not purely Armenian movement, because it came through Russia, through Georgia, to Armenia, and the origin was in Germany. There were some Lutheran missionaries who started missionary work in Russia, then they moved to Georgia, and then they ended up in Armenia. And according to these ideas, I mean, in the early 19th century, in 1828, in Shushi Shushi is in Nagorno-Karabakh, another Armenian state. So in 1828, they had established a branch of the Bible Society. And this was done by the Armenians with the support of the Lutheran, Armenian evangelicals with the support of the Lutheran Missionary Board. So it seems that from two sides, we had two different evangelical streams. One was coming from inside the church, the other one was a missionary movement from the outside, but they coincided. I mean, in history, 15 or 20 years is not much for such a big movement. Fortunately, or unfortunately, they came together only after the genocide, when we had already Soviet regime established here. And of course, many of the pastors, many of the ministers who had survived genocide ended up in Siberia. They were exiled. Some of them were beheaded, imprisoned, tortured for their faith. It happened in 1920s. And thereafter, I mean, it was Stalin regime. No church. Or as usually he was saying, if the person is missing, the problem is over. So they were thinking if they will, let's say, eradicate the leadership of the Armenian Evangelical Church, and other churches as well, by the way, Armenian Apostolic Church, Catholic Church, they will solve the problem with the church. So there won't be leadership, there won't be believers. What amazes me most, Stalin was himself a graduate of a seminary. So at some point in his life, he should have heard about the faithfulness of God to his people. Probably he forgot. But the fact that the Armenian Evangelical Church is still present here speaks about God's faithfulness. It's a witness of his commitment to his people. And what happened then, when the Second World War broke out? There were no churches officially existing in Armenia or elsewhere in the Soviet Union. But in 1944, under the pressure of the Allies, he signed a decree according to which the work and the services of the evangelical churches in the Soviet Union should be reopened and reestablished. The problem was that because the biggest evangelical denomination in Russia was the Baptist Church, we got all under the umbrella of the Baptist Church. So there was only one evangelical movement in the Soviet Union, Evangelical Baptist Church. And the Armenian evangelicals all of a sudden found themselves as Baptists. Yeah, you're laughing. I mean, now many people are claiming that the Armenian Evangelical Church didn't exist in Armenia. There was only Baptist Church. You are a newcomers to this country. Okay, thank you. And from that point on, in Armenia, we had two types of Armenian evangelical churches, actually. We had an official church, and we also had a hidden church, underground church. I'm coming from the underground church, by the way. So I always was in opposition to everyone. That's the type of people you grow in underground churches, usually. They're always dissatisfied. They want more, which is good. So, and it lasted until 1991 when Armenia regained the independence. And then, actually in 1988, after the earthquake in Spitak, Armenian Missionary Association of America and a newly established Hope for Armenia organization in France decided to join their efforts and start some relief work in Armenia. Because after the earthquake, the most important and the biggest need was to provide some humanitarian aid. 1/3 of the country was demolished.